There are two kinds of dashes. There's the M dash and the N dash, and it's obviously quite difficult to hear the difference. But you can see the difference if you write them out, and the M dash is quite a bit longer. It's about as wide as a capital letter M, and the N dash is a little bit shorter. So if you want to form the M dash, which is the one we're going to focus on in this video, if you want to form it, you basically just type two shorter dashes and then keep typing in Microsoft Word, and Word will automatically reformat those two shorter dashes into a longer M dash. Now the M dash has four major uses, so 4 uses, and we're going to focus on those each in turn in this video. The first use of the dash is before a final explanation. In other words, you can use the dash to extend your sentence a little bit. If we look at the first example here, we've used the dash between two independent clauses. So we have an independent clause before and after the dash. We can use other punctuation marks for this purpose as well. So we can use a colon or we could use a semicolon, but there's a slight difference between each of these. So a semicolon is used between two equal elements. A colon is used before a second independent clause that zooms in or explains the first, so it's a clause that's more specific. And a dash functions just like the colon, but it creates a little bit more of a casual effect. And in fact, that's the general theme with the dash, that you are using the dash much like other punctuation marks usually, but you're creating this more casual or relaxed effect. In the second example here, we've used the dash, again, just like a colon, or a comma to some extent as well, before an appositive. And an appositive is a noun or noun phrase that renames an earlier noun in the sentence. In this case, a messenger renames some other protein, the noun that came before the dash. And the point of using a dash is that it allows you to draw more attention to what comes afterwards. So with a dash, we tend to focus in, we zoom in a little bit, whereas some of these other punctuation marks don't say too much about how you should value this final information. Let's look at a couple more examples of how we can use a dash to extend a sentence. In the first place here, we've used a dash before a list, and that makes it very similar to how we would use a colon to introduce a list. In fact, all the same rules apply. So we start our sentence with an independent clause, we add our colon or dash, and then we add the items in the list. The last example of how we can extend a sentence with a dash is quite interesting, and it shows how a dash can even act like a comma at times. So we could easily put a comma in that spot. But a dash, again, allows us to pick up a little bit of energy at the end of the sentence. It allows us to refocus. There's a slightly longer pause. And as we go to the end of the sentence, then the sentence picks up steam and has a bit more of a sense of finality to it. So try it out yourself, and you can read the sentence as well, pause the video, and get a better sense of how the dash is used here. But as you can see, it's basically a comma, which then allows us to extend the sentence. The second use of the dash is after an introductory element. And in the first case here, we've used the dash after a list. So we start off with our list, then we add the dash, and then we have to really make sure that we refer back to what came before, so that as we finish our sentence, we don't have just some random final clause, but we actually refer back to what we started with. And we've done that here by saying we did all of them. So the them summarizes the items in the list and allows us to finish nicely. We see something similar in the last example, but what's kind of neat here is that we've used a dash not just after a list, but in order to kind of bring us back on track. After the sentence seems to wander off a little bit, it digresses, the dash allows us to gather all our threads and make sure that we can finish the sentence properly. So this one reads, when he had tanked up and had bought groceries for the picnic, including some lovely brie and a bottle of wine, and you can see how the sentence is going off track there, then the dash comes in, And then after the dash, we refocus. And we do that by repeating the conjunction that we started with. So when he had done all this, that reminds us of how we started. When he had done all this, and this again also repeats kind of what came before, John set out for the coast by himself. Kind of a sad ending to the story there. So in this example, we see then that a dash allows you to almost restart your sentence and gather your ideas together and kind of finish with a complete clause. Obviously, this has a very casual effect because it seems like you had no idea what you were going to say, and then you needed the dash to bail you out. There is some truth to that, but a lot of writers use this on purpose to create that more kind of nonchalant, relaxed impression. So use it sparingly, use it for effect, and I think if you do that, you'll make your writing more stylish. Next, we'll have a look at how you can use dashes around parenthetical information. And we call this information non-essential information, sometimes also called restrictive information. And the idea here is that the information does not restrict or limit the meaning of the rest of the sentence. You can easily do without it, in fact, and the sentence would, at least grammatically, keep on going. So we use other punctuation marks to create this effect as well, and we can use parentheses or we can use commas around non-essential information. There's a slight difference in tone between them. So parentheses tend to hide the information. Commas are less judgmental. They kind of say, well, take it or leave it. It's really up to you. And dashes are a bit more casual in some way, but they also tend to draw attention to the information. And that tension then between being both casual and saying, well, it is kind of important, creates these interesting stylistic effects. So if you look at the first example here, for instance, the sentence is really relaxed and nonchalant, right? I mean, it's kind of saying, well, a bunch of protesters have been killed and others dispersed, which normally would be a big deal. And then it adds these dashes and it says nothing exceptional in that. And then the sentence finishes, but a new element had intruded itself. So you can sense the tension then between that really relaxed style saying, well, none of this is a big deal, and yet the dashes, by drawing some attention to what's in between them, are saying, yeah, but there is something important going on as well. So the irony here then is what's interesting, and I would suggest that you experiment with a dash and see if you can create similar effects yourself. And so we come to our last major use of the M dash, which is with a break in speech. I'll let you read these examples yourself, but the point is this. If there's a sudden break or a moment of hesitation or shift in direction, or even the speaker simply stopping to speak altogether, you can use this dash to show this effect going on. Obviously, this is not something you would do in academic writing quite often, but it is a very useful technique for fiction. That's it for the M dash. I hope you enjoyed this explanation. Keep experimenting. It's going to take some time to really feel comfortable with the dash, but it is really a punctuation mark that's worth your while, especially because it allows you to create these more casual effects in writing.